Hi, and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. I am your host today, Paige Niedringhaus, and we have two special guests on the podcast today. We have Adam Argyle, a design engineer at Shopify, and we have Kevin Powell, a CSS evangelist, here to talk about the state of CSS in 2025. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I mean, CSS has really been, it seems like, having a couple of really good years. There are so many new things that are coming out, new functions, new frameworks, new techniques even. So let's just talk about what is happening this year with CSS in particular. The State of CSS survey came out recently, and it kind of provides a good jumping off point. So let's talk about, why does CSS seem to have remained almost irreplaceable in terms of the front end stack? We have lots of abstractions with JavaScript frameworks and even new ways to do HTML or JSX or things like that. But CSS just seems to keep hanging on no matter what.
Yeah, CSS is, it's so funny. It's the reigning champ. Like, why can't it be overtaken by something? Tailwind, maybe you could think of it like it is, but it's not. It's a subset of it. It's using CSS. It's not replacing it in any way at all. In fact, it's having a hard time keeping up because classes used to feel like sort of this very powerful way to contain styles. But, and then now we have at starting style. We have all sorts of things that sort of change just the state of your styles, and that things that query other things in order to return a value. We have functions coming, we have mixins coming. I think it's reigning as the champ because there are so many edge cases it's handling that people that try to build their own tooling or build their own solutions can't quite grip all of them. And if you can't grip all of them, it leaves a huge set of people that are going, I'm not just going to use up to 2010's CSS. Like, all this new stuff is really valuable to my users, and it's easy for me to put in a style sheet. So I think that's like this weird combination of, we do think of styles very declaratively, even though we have functions and mixins. But that strategy of just having these willy-nilly styles, it's just the same thing if you bring in functions from Lodash. That's basically what Tailwind is for styles. So you could pre-package a lot of things and then you compose. And I think people like composition. CSS is basically composition out of the box with a whole bunch of features to make composition even more powerful.
Yeah, I think the other part of it is it's just really good at what it does with everything. And it's just getting better. Like Adam's saying, there's all these new features coming. And while people have always been trying to solve some of the problems with CSS, but there's like some of those problems that people are trying to solve, like the global scope of it is one of the biggest features that just works really well for, at least, I know sometimes it can get in the way depending on what you're doing, but at like just a base level of set some styles up, and then the base styles for your site, just go through everything and your looks good, and you don't need to overcomplicate things, or, it works. And so I think that is a big feature of it, is at a basic level. While I know there's people that have complaints and issues with certain ways that some things are done, I think overall it solves the problem really well. And now we're just getting new features and other things coming in that make more particular things easier to solve as well. So it just keeps improving and getting better. And like Adam said, now there's so many new features coming that it's hard for these other things that are trying, like Tailwind and other stuff, incorporate all of that because they're coming at such a fast pace. And they're also going a little bit out of the scope of how those tools work. Like starting style, how would that work if you're just doing it with a class? Or it's not here yet, but we have like environment variables coming that you probably can't do with a class because that's like at a higher level. And there's new things that I think won't be able to, or at least not in a simple way, be solved with these. So then all of a sudden you're limiting what you can actually accomplish when the native language can do more.
Yeah. And it's funny because Tailwind seems to have gained so much steam over the past few years. But now when you look at the things that Tailwind is pushing out in terms of its new releases, it's supporting more CSS features or making it easier to incorporate real traditional CSS into it. So yeah, it's almost like they're reversing course a little bit.
They have to. It's the language feels like it's in the future right now. And it's consuming other parts of the application's roles. And that's so a lot of people are like, oh, I'll do it JavaScript. And you're like, why? Now it's just a couple lines of CSS. And they're like, it is? And you're like, it could have always been that way. Like, you just like to grab the reins and control things. But now we can just let the browser do it. And So it's like ahead of every framework. CSS right now, I'm just going to say, is like this weird blanket statement that it is ahead, maybe even by a year or two, of all these frameworks. It's going to take other huge frameworks a lot of thinking to start to incorporate what CSS is just like, wow, look at that. Look at shing over here. You're just like, what do we do? You're like, I don't know. You just got to keep watching and try it out as it comes out. I don't know. But yeah, the future thing feels weird to me where I'm like looking at frameworks like they can't keep up, or they're not even equipped in a state to handle the new stuff. And I don't know where we're going to go from here.
Well, that's actually a really good segue. It seems like people still misunderstand a lot about what CSS can do, which leads them to try and replace it with JavaScript frameworks or drop in polyfills or just do random stuff that they think they are incapable of doing with CSS straight up.
Yeah, I saw a Blue Sky post the other day that was something like, for everybody who complains about CSS being a hard language, or that it's not intuitive or whatever it is, that they just haven't actually learned it and don't understand how it works. And I think that's a big part of it, is people have tried to make it something different, and not a little bit like I was saying before about the global nature of it. And there's all these authoring styles or the frameworks that come in to try and limit that, when there are times where maybe you do, you can run into issues. But if you learn why does it do that in the first place and think about it a bit, and how much easier that actually can make your life, and a lot of like the real fundamentals with CSS that are different from other programming languages, that they're different for a reason. It's not because it was a badly designed language where they were like, oh, let's just try something different. For something that was created before layouts were even a thing on the web, they made a lot of really smart decisions early on. There might have been a few mistakes here or there, but it happens. But overall, I think they put a really strong foundation that works really well. And the main issue is a lot of the time people just not understanding how the language is meant to be written, or how it actually works under the hood a little bit. Because there's the browser's doing a lot of stuff, and we're hooking into these APIs that the browser has and doing all these things with it.
He's reminding me that when you're writing JavaScript and other programming languages, it's often a lot about you as the developer, right? It's like, me, I want this, and I want you to take these 10 files and then do this. And you're giving demands and requests, or they're not requests. And that's kind of where CSS is a lot different. This CSS is like, hey, I care about the user. And you're like, I want the width to be this. And it's like, nope. And you're like, well, what the heck? I wrote width 50% and it's not what I want. And you're like, well, it's not about you. There's a lot of things that factor here.
It also sounds weird because it's 100% right, but that's building off of it being a declarative language where it feels like you're telling it what to do. Like, I'm saying the color should be blue or the width should be 50%, and then it doesn't do that thing that you'd within 10 characters told it to do something. And then when it doesn't do exactly what you said, people get frustrated. But it's dealing with so many variables and constraints that we have no idea about, that you can't write it that way.
Then you just throw important on the back of it and hope that fixes it. So, well, that's a really good lead in. It seems like the Twitter wars of yesteryear, where everybody's like, CSS isn't a programming language, might finally be shifting. Do you think that is true, and that people are starting to come around to the fact that CSS is indeed like a first-class language?
I don't think anything's changed. I think the language is full of pure functions. It's a typed language. It's the only typed language we have that runs types in the browser. It has hundreds of aspects of a coding language, and still I don't see that needle shifting at all. But amongst the people I talk to, it's still to them the same thing it's ever been. Even with if statements, if it could do if statements. It's been Turing complete way before it had ifs, y'all. Like, I don't even know if Turing complete matters to you, but I'm kind of on a high horse because I've been like fighting this for a while. I'm just trying to show all the parallels between what CSS and JavaScript can do. Like JavaScript, you have an array and you iterate it on an array and you map a bunch of changes to it. That's what a selector does. You write a selector, it finds all the items, it maps them and applies the, like what's so different about you doing it in JavaScript and you feeling that it's, and then again, I hear people comparing it to, it's not about programming languages. It's not a scripting language. Sure, it's programming, whatever, Adam. Yeah, it has functions and if and mixins and whatever, but it's still not a scripting language. And I'm like, what do you even care? I'm like, what do you get out of this conversation? So that's why the Twitter wars are always fun to watch, because you're like, I don't understand these arguments. Anyway, what do you think, Kevin? Do you feel like it's moving the needle?
I think most of the people that I see saying, like, that are more on, like, it is a programming language, are the ones who are already, they're just more vocal about it now. As some of these new features are coming, the people that already like CSS, I'm a little bit with you though. Like some people are just going to shift the goalposts when it starts doing the things they wanted it to find other things, like you said. And then at the end of the day, I don't know, call it what you want. It doesn't change anything for me. If you want to say it is what it is, I love it either way. And it's not going to change what I think about that or any other language, however you want to sort of categorize it.
Elizabeth here, production assistant for PodRocket. We're running a listener survey to help shape future episodes and make the podcast a better experience. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes of your time, and you can find the link in the description.
So with CSS getting things now natively like mixins and functions and math and if statements and nested CSS, do you think that there's still a place for preprocessors or post CSS processors, or are those not really needed and obsolete nowadays?
I still think there's room for them. I definitely do think it's more niche. I use maps and loops in Sass still for some things that I work on, and it's convenient, and I like having that. As far as I know, the working group has said they're not going to bring in loops to CSS because that doesn't really belong in what it does. Most people probably don't use that anyway. So if that's the case, then, it's taken what they did where they were super useful to being like, okay, we're handling a lot of these things. If depending on your use case, maybe it could still be potentially awesome, but maybe you don't need it anymore. I know when I mentioned loops last time to somebody, they said the only time because we have sibling index and sibling count now, and they're like, that removed my entire need for loops. And so I was like, fair enough. That's awesome. Then you don't need an extra dependency. And for me, that's pretty cool.
Nice. I think that's a great answer. And just speaking on loops and stuff too, I was just thinking you could use sibling index and the attribute function to basically know which index of child you are and extract data off of yourself as an element and use it to change yourself. That's pretty cool. It feels like loops, but the browser is just handling everything for you. And you just have a declarative block. You don't have to worry about what's the length. Plus, you don't have to worry about that junk. I still use preprocessors a little bit. I get concatenation's one for me. I like to send one file. What's nice though is I've gotten to delete tons of plugins. I don't have to do nesting anymore. I don't have to do layers anymore. I do have a glob import. So it's one of my things. It's not a loop, but I have a glob import. I'm like, look at the components folder and find every nested CSS file and just smoosh it right here into this layer. There you go. All the components in a smooshed layer. And then I can just go put in, here's my third party. Anyway, so it's I'm still concatenating, but now I'm using native layers and I am still using an import syntax. It just seems until the browser gets way better at fetching 50 CSS files, which is pretty much how many it'd have to do at this point for at least my website, probably more. That doesn't seem very feasible. I don't know. So maybe we'll keep calm and concatenate on. I don't know. I just made that up. It sounds really dumb. Maybe it's fun in our circles. I'm not sure.
CSS nesting was probably one of my favorite new features that came out within the last 12 months or whenever it was as well. That and container queries. Container queries have made my life so much easier in so many ways. Are you ever concerned, though, that there might be too many features that CSS tries to natively support and it might get kind of bloated in the future? Is that a concern?
I wouldn't use bloat, but fear, yeah. My brain is only so small,
I think for me, the nice thing with it, and I do a lot of stuff with beginners, and I could see it being overwhelming. It was already a lot of stuff. When you start learning all the properties and values, that's just cognitive overload at the beginning. And now that list is getting longer and longer. But the cool thing with it is you can still start with the basics and those haven't changed. And then these newer things are these extra features and other things we're getting that enable us to do more things. So I'm all for it. The more we have, the better. And you learn the things as you need them. We can do squircles now. I might not know what even that is, but then once I'm trying to look at it, that might not be you want to do an inset corner or something like that. It's easy to do now with that feature. And so when you're looking it up, then you actually find this really easy answer instead of having to come up with some weird hack or something like that to accomplish the same thing. So yeah, I think if you're trying to learn everything because you're following a roadmap and it just has this giant list of features, it's probably overwhelming, but otherwise I'm all for it.
I feel like there needs to be a chart. People love charts. So here's a meme chart someone needs to make, because Kevin's right. CSS grows with you. There's not a lot of other languages that do that. A lot of other languages are super intimidating right off the bat and kind of put all of this weight on you immediately. And CSS doesn't do that, right? People will do color red. I'm a genius. I can write a code. Look at me go. And then, but then it grows with you and it scales with you. And so the chart that I'm thinking of is like right off the bat, you're like, I write CSS. I'm a CSS god. And then you crash. There's always a crash somewhere right after there. Cause you can see people that are like new on Twitter or whatever. They're like 100 days of CSS and HTML. I'm a CSS god. And then later they're like, oh crap, it's crushing me. But then, so yeah, you crash. But then as you start picking up one by one and you start, oh, dang, that was really handy and really cool. That unit, I didn't even know that kind of unit existed. Wow, that's really specifically powerful right here. And it's 3 characters. That's really bizarre. And so then you start to get like stoked. And then you subscribe to Kevin Powell on YouTube. And then you're just heading up this chart. So I don't know if there's another crash later on when you're like, I love CSS. And then it's like, yeah, but there really are a lot of features. Then you crash a little and then you go back. So maybe it's a wave. I don't know. Someone make this meme. I feel like it personify all of us learning CSS right now.
Yeah, it's like the Gartner hype cycle, but just for developers.
Nice.
But honestly, I think one of the big things for me, because I definitely went through that, I went to a coding boot camp and learned like the basics and felt like I could make anything for about 3 weeks and then realized how much more there was beyond that. But I think one of the things that you start to realize as you get further along in your career and further along with using CSS is that you, like you said, you can dip in when you need to learn something new and then you're good for a while and you can let things happen, let new changes take effect, let new features come into play, and then you'll be tasked with doing something and you'll be like, oh, I think I can remember somebody talking about that. Maybe I should check it out again. Maybe I can do a carousel without having to use JavaScript for the first time. Yeah. So it's almost like you can ride for a little bit with what you've learned and then go back in and pick back up.
Yeah, I think a lot of it these days is about, I think with everything we do, but just being aware of things that might be possible. The carousel, anchor positioning solves so many problems that we've had for so long. There's like all these things. So just being like, if you just keep like a little bit of an ear on the pulse of things. So when you do run into a problem on a new project or something, you're like, I think I remember hearing that. I think that's exactly the right approach to take.
One thing that I was hoping that you two could educate me about a little bit, because I really don't feel like I have a good grasp yet, is the new functions that are coming to CSS. Can you tell me or tell the listeners and me, like, how do I use them? What's the benefit of them? Where would I put them into my day-to-day CSS and really get some value from them?
I'll do a high-level one if you want to dive into a little more details, Kevin. At a high level, I think of functions returning values. So you use them where values go. Mixins can return a block of styles. And so that's a really high level, but I think one of the best distinctions right off the bat is a function will return a value. And inside of it, it can do conditionals and media queries and all these different CSS superpowers to return something. And that would be a function is a value. It's not going to be more than that. So that's a little bit different than maybe thinking about functions in other languages.
The thing that it's a friend of mine for me because I'm working on something with colors right now is the relative color syntax, which another new CSS feature where if you have a variable and you want to manipulate that color somehow, it's really awesome. But it's kind of a verbose, like you have to write the color or the color function from this color, then you put the H, the SCL, or whatever color space you're working in, and then you're doing a calc on something. And so it's kind of long. So like having a custom function, and if anybody was using a preprocessor before, you had the lighten and the darken functions that you could use. You could just recreate those in CSS. So you can choose your color and how much you want to lighten it by or how much you want to darken it by. And those are going to be 2 arguments you pass, and it gives you that value as your new color. So for small manipulations on things like that, I think it's really handy. Outside of that, I'm the type of person who's like seeing what all the really clever people come up with. And then I'm like, okay, that's how I can use this now. So like, I'm sure as it evolves, it's a bit like even when you look at custom properties that were like, at first it was like, okay, I can replace my Sass variables with these. And then it's, oh wait, they can do more because they're native variables in the browser that the browser we're not compiling it. So then all of a sudden now there's all these amazing use cases and things that are coming. So I'm actually really curious to see what happens with things like native functions and mixins and stuff compared to how we've used them previously with preprocessors.
Functions are going to really upset people who are already confused at CSS.
Yes.
And what I mean, and I'm not like upset, but maybe not upset. It depends on whether or not you're upset when people abstract a function. If they take a set of instructions and then they make a function out of it, does that make you upset? Maybe if you were in the single file world, you're like, all of my code is in this one file. Why did you move it to another file? How dare you? If that's the phase you're in, and you're probably already annoyed at a lot of the complexity of web development. But so CSS at this point just has so many abstractions inside of its own self for resolving values, given the whole humongous matrix of context it has to be aware of, that people coming into the back end, like if they approach a front end, so let's say Adam built a front end, I built a design system, tons of custom properties, I got custom functions that imitate things from Sass and Compass and Nib all back in the day. I've got all these. And so you're like, where's the value? I have a bug. Where is my value? There's going to be people that are going to be really upset. Like, how in the world did this resolve? And so they're going to be in DevTools, maybe if they even know how to use the CSS DevTools. And then mixins, you throw just like at scope, you throw at layer, all CSS variables and functions and if statements in there. You're looking at, hey, I thought I was going to be reading CSS. Why am I reading functional programming? And you're like, tough. The world has moved forward and CSS is now as powerful as your other functional languages. Well, hey, I liked it when I thought it was dumb. When I said tough, like I'm in the front end. I'm going to write really robust front ends, just like you write really robust APIs. So you and I are doing the same thing now. And I just can't wait for the confusion or the frustration. It's going to be fun to watch.
Earlier when I was mentioning like a beginner you can still start with the same basics. I do feel a bit bad in like 2 years now, once all of these features are well supported, when somebody's gone through their introduction thing, colored red, they're the superhero, they put their box shadow on something, and then they open up like some other example and they just see it's not the same language. Like they're just like,
yeah, it's already done that.
That might be a little demotivating.
ES6 did that. I remember writing vanilla JavaScript way before arrow functions. And it was just like,
yes, yeah.
Then you start opening up files with arrow functions. You're like, what? This looks weird. What's this const word at the top? There's imports. Like, what the? I missed my iffies, The page is like, I know iffies and I loved them. Anyway, so yeah, I feel the same way about CSS. And it's been doing that since nesting and more functions. As more functions show up, as more at rules show up, it's a completely different looking language. Yeah.
It seems like a lot of kind of what's pushing CSS across the board is that the browsers are finally working together and like talking about what features they're going to prioritize for a year and what are the important things. Do you think that trust is something that we can continue to rely on, that they're going to keep operating as a group, like prioritizing stuff, making it happen? Because the polyfills were like, that was the only way that you could maybe get pretty good browser support across a lot of different browsers back in the day. But it seems like there's a lot less need for that now.
That's a spicy question. Yeah. Are these groups going to continue doing interop? I don't know. It's been nice as like an observer and a participant in that to see that even came together to exist. I do like competition also. So I guess there is a competitive nature to interop. It's like, how much of it did you succeed at? What's motivating them is what I'm struggling with. Because yeah, even just being a browser right now seems like it's hard work for everybody. It's really expensive. People aren't searching anymore. The amount that could be brought in for a company owning a browser is less and less. And so I don't know if they're going to continue giving into it in the same way. That's why I felt it was a spicy question. Like, to me, I'm assuming no, but maybe something changes. Maybe we see an explosion of browsers. Like we're seeing an explosion of IDEs right now. I have like 6 IDEs installed. I'm like, what the heck? They're all VS Code forks. And then I'm like, I feel bad for VS Code. You're the one I don't open anymore. And that might happen to Chrome. I got Dia installed. There's all these new browsers popping up. They're all Chromium based. Well, Arc was badass. If Chrome just becomes this stable foundation for all this other stuff, maybe Interop could continue because people back invest. Like Arc just got bought and they're like, oh, we piggybacked on side of Chrome. Maybe we'll go give to standards work because that's really nice. But I don't know. Money moves in weird places. I'd like to see it continue, but it feels threatened to me. And that's why I was like, ooh, spicy question. I hadn't considered this. So yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like there's been a deprioritization of the web or the browser itself, because like you said, we've got Dia, we've got Comet, OpenAI is trying to come out with their own, everybody, but it's all AI companies who are just like bolting themselves into some kind of a skinned Chromium. It's not actually building new browsers, except for Ladybird. Ladybird is an interesting one, and I will watch that closely. It's so ambitious of them to be like, we're just going to build something brand new from the ground up. We're not going to use anybody's existing anything to start us off. I don't know how they're going to get to release, honestly. That seems like a really big task.
I'm with you on that. I think that's very ambitious. It's cool that someone's trying. I think it's amazing. And it would be nice to see progress made. But I mean, it's such a big undertaking and there's always new stuff coming. And I don't know how they're able to, I don't know. It seems like it's such a big undertaking. But speaking a bit to what Adam said, I guess that would be the one thing, I guess, that would keep them going, is potentially, as maybe Chrome or Google sees Chrome as less important, if there is funding coming in from the ones who are relying on it. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years there.
There's been historical moments where that happened, like Bloomberg paid for Grid, and I think they even paid for Grid across two browsers. So imagine Dia or some wildly new famous browser is just racking in the dough from their paid version of their browser, and they just start to pay it forward back into that would be really cool. I'm somehow skeptical of that happening, but maybe it could.
Me too.
And then the last thing too is on Chrome. It wasn't just AI threatening the browser; it was youth. Youth don't open the browser. The browser is just it's like this weird little temporary space that I go after a TikTok link sends me there. It's not where I go to learn or watch or spend my time. So they're watching is people aren't searching a Google search as much anymore. That's AI is just consuming that more and more and more. And youth aren't opening up the browser, or if they do, they don't even know they're in it or whatever.
God.
So yeah, I don't think it's a dying thing. Like the web is obviously one of the strongest foundational backbones of applications and e-commerce and everything that we have right now. But it is oddly underused in some awkward ways. I don't know. So yeah, it's the future. Kids don't even open a browser. They just ask their AI to search the browser for them. And so that we're almost headed towards that on like a crash course. So what happens to Interop when the browser is not a recognized app that people roll off their tongue anymore? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do the AI agents care if we support baseline and cascade layers and things like that? Probably not.
Maybe AI can start putting features in browsers. How about that? So instead of Bloomberg paying for it, we got a model. It's like our new supermodel can do web standards work perfectly. I guess that is the spec-driven stuff. Anyway, I don't know. That would be cool. We'll see.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, how do you decide when a new CSS feature is ready for production use versus it's just available or it's implemented by one browser but not another? Like, how do you say, okay, this is good enough support, let's put it into production?
Well, I'm a wild wester, and as long as it's not crashing my tab, I'll ship it. So on my site, I literally the other day was trying to add the new scroll spy feature. It's basically like a carousel feature where like a link knows when it's in view or its related content is in view. So it's a scroll spy and a couple lines of CSS. Truly, it's very cool. I put it on my site, crashed my site. My site is really good at crashing the browser because it has scroll-driven animations, view transitions, cascade layers. So they run unit tests on a lot of the browser features, but they never load up a site that's got all of it in one. And oh man, I crash the browser a lot. So for me, I'm willing to adopt it as soon as possible. You got @supports. You got all these different ways to adopt things. Some are harder than others. Anchoring is hard to partially adopt, right? You don't want to not show it or not have it attached. That's awkward. I'm not the norm. When I was running a lot of interviews, most people adopted something along the lines of a baseline type of indicator. They didn't use the word baseline then, but something that was in every browser that they weren't going to ship. Because the last thing people want to do is ship a feature, and then the CEO, who always has some weird old garbage Android phone, opens up your app and is like, hey, I don't see the new thingy. And you're like, dang it, why don't you have an iPhone? Now you don't think we're shipping things, but we are. So people get this massive pressure to make every browser look the same. And that pressure forces them into late adoption. So anyway, it just depends on what your values are, whether you need it to look the same everywhere, and a few other factors.
Whether you like to live on the edge or you have different users who may not be on the latest.
Yeah, I'm very similar to Adam in that I like having fun with all the stuff I'm doing. So I'm going to play around with it. I had a comment on one of my videos recently. I don't remember which one it was looking at. I probably was using anchor positioning and a couple of other things in it. And one of the comments was asking something about browser support. And the person replied as being like, oh, don't watch Kevin's videos if you're looking for things you can implement today. Watch it for what you're doing in 2 years. And I was like, oh, come on. It's not that bad. This one, yes, definitely was this isn't something, but it was also a weird thing that you probably wouldn't want to do exactly as I did it. We're pushing the boundaries a little bit. But I think for the most part, I always again, it depends on who you're building it for and everything else. Like Adam said, my first question is always, can you do it as a progressive enhancement? view transitions are like the perfect example there. If it doesn't transition, does it really matter? And then if the person's on a newer browser, they get a fancy animation that looks cool, or a crossfade, or whatever it is between pages, and things like that. Or there's the like interpolate size. I'm going to mix them up now. Is that the allow keywords one?
It is. Yeah, that's one.
Okay.
I'm like, you rolled that right off your tongue real good. You must practice.
That one's another like a nice progressive enhancement. And there's a lot of features that you can use like that. Then there's other ones, like Adam said, you can use at supports. So for some things, I'll use that where it's like, I'll have a fallback and then come in with something a bit fancier. Just in that case, if it would break the layout, let's say. So I'll use this other thing instead. But I won't go and make two versions of something I have to support. Like it'd be a simple fallback, then a little bit of a fancier thing. And then like right now, I probably wouldn't be using custom functions or my if statements yet in production, just because I'm assuming most of my audience, even my audience, wouldn't be running browsers that can necessarily deal with those. So it depends a little bit on, or even like layers. For me, layers were a really big thing because I was like, this is one of those features that could be cool, but it just breaks your CSS if it's not supported. And so I was curious, when are we actually going to start seeing it in the wild? And it's cool seeing it in the wild now, even on some decent sized sites every now and then. If I'm poking around, I'm like, oh, they use layers here. That's cool. Okay. So it's with features like that I find it interesting. But a lot of the time I do try and do things as a progressive enhancement if I can, because it just lets me squeeze in cooler stuff.
It's a little bit of extra for people who can support it. And for everybody else, it just looks the same as it would have before.
How about you, Paige? When do you adopt new CSS features, or your company either?
Usually when Chrome supports it, because I think the vast majority of our users are on desktops for what we do. And Chrome is pretty much the one that we guide people towards because it has web APIs that support like serial connections and some other stuff that really, unfortunately, Firefox and Safari just don't do as well with. So yeah, most of the time I'm the one who's doing the CSS, me or one or two other developers. So whenever we come across it and find a reason to use it, we'll try to. But yeah, we just don't have a whole lot of design focused stuff that we're doing as much as other features that are specific to IoT devices, because that's the company that I work for. Blues is an IoT startup. So less about the nice, really beautiful SaaS dashboards and more about the internals and the underlying workings. But one thing that I did want to ask you about, because I think you guys probably know more, is there's a relatively new app property function that has come out. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that is, what it does, what would we use it for?
Nice. I have given a couple of talks on this. Maybe I'll give you a link to show notes. One I did at Epic Web is a 5-minute lightning talk on app property. App property is a way for you to both make something type safe in your custom properties. So that would be like if you're like, this is a color. So its name is app property, our brand background. And someone later sets it to a number like 30. That would, in today's variable usage, break your color system. The colors would disappear from everywhere. And you'd be like, why? And it's because we put an invalid value in there and CSS just keeps painting. It's like, oh, you tried to paint 0. That's nothing. So you got nothing. And it just moves on. But app property allows you to also make something type safe by specifying the accepted types that it is. So CSS, being a typed language, already had types prepared before the syntax showed up. This just gave us the ability to tap into it. So now I can say our background color is a color type. And someone tries to set it to 0, 0, and our color system continues working. It always will resolve to its last known valid value, which, by the way, what if JavaScript had that? What if JavaScript had a way for you to not just make it type safe at build time, but also like at runtime, it'd be like, hey, you tried to set me to a null thing that would break this upstream thing. I'm just going to keep my current value. What do you think about that? I'm like, that's nice. I don't know. I'd have stale values everywhere, but it's better than apps crashing. So then there's one more feature. So in addition to type safety, it actually has more than one feature, but I think the core features here is type safety in your variable systems. And the second one is you can now, since it's typed, interpolate values inside of it. So traditionally, just like var can be 0, and then later you can be like, var is string, I am cool. And then later, var is a function, and var is just like, I'm adapting to whatever you set me to. That's how CSS variables are. However, a CSS variable, if you want to animate it from, let's say you set the variable to 0, and then you set the variable to 100, and you're like, I want to animate that, or just show it on screen, or whatever. I want this to interpolate over 1 second, go from 0 to 100. The browser would be like, can't. And you'd be like, what do you mean you can't? It's so obvious. And it's like, no, I'm a loose typed variable and I can't really depend on the variable I'm going to be the same as what I am now. So that means I don't even know how to interpolate that or whatever. And so then now you type it and you're like, now you're an integer. And it goes, oh, I'll go 0 to 100 now, piece of cake. I know for a fact that every single iteration along the way, I'm a number, boop, and it does the, so you can like, by being very specific about the type of a variable, they get more useful in more places. They get animatable in more places. You can almost take a scalpel idea. Instead of animating a property, you animate a custom property that then you can put wherever you want. And so now every time you animate that custom property, they all update. And you're like, whoa, CSS rules. And it's all type safe. So you get a lot of bang for your buck in this little definition. The annoying part being it's a little bit verbose to define all your variables this way. But anyway, that's my high level shindig on it. What you got, Kevin?
I use it a lot and I still feel really weird every time I transition or use keyframes and I'm just changing a custom property value. I'm like, this just looks strange, but hey, it's working and it does exactly what I want it to. And I'm very happy about that. The other thing that I didn't realize would ever be important, because one of the other things you can define is whether it inherits or not, because normally custom properties always inherit. And you can say inherits false. And I was like, why would I ever want to do that? And then since then, it's definitely one of those things where every now and then I'm like, oh, wait, this problem is happening because this value is being inherited and I can turn that off now. And now it fixes this problem I had where I was having conflicting values because I'd be using like a fallback value or something, like a custom property with a fallback value. So then the inner version could continue using that fallback value, whereas the outer version would be using a defined thing on it. Anyway, yeah, it's one of those definitely more niche use cases, but you're super happy that they included it because it can be useful.
Yep, glad you covered that one. It's a good use case.
For sure. That's so interesting. I had no idea. So I'm actually really glad that you guys could give me a high level primer on it. So what are some other features that you would like to see CSS start to support in the future? If you had the sky is the limit, your favorite things, what would you like them to focus on next?
Oh, this is a hard one for me because I can never think of good things. And then I always hear other people listing off stuff. And I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? That's a great thing. And this is going back 8 years now with all these new things that are being added. And I'm always like, how did I not think that would be useful? That's amazing. But I'm just always happy with what we have now. I think the big one, like I'm playing around with the custom functions. I'm just like, oh, this opens up a few things that there was limitations on that I think, and like with the data attributes, the custom attributes now that we can do some more stuff with. And I'm just like, it's almost like we can start creating a lot of our own features that we might want to have. So I'm just like, this is really powerful and cool. And like, I'm curious to see the other things that will come down the pipeline that can build on top of this as well. Because I think that's a lot of the advancements we've seen lately have been like, once they figured out how to do, or was it even container? What was the thing that made container queries possible? Or is it the other way around? I don't remember. But you'd see a feature come out and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, that means these 4 other new things are also possible because we've solved this other problem. So yeah, I'm more curious to see what's going to come. But maybe Adam has some good ideas because he's more creative than I am when it comes to all the stuff he's up to.
It was also part of my job was to extract these out of human brains and get them into the CSS working group. So I ran a lot of interviews asking people like, what can't you do? And we've got a lot of them. So that kind of immediately knocks a lot of them for me off the top of my head. Like sibling index was one of mine that I pitched a long time ago. And it sounded like it would never get built. And then all of a sudden someone's like, oh, we're going to do it. Sounds easy. I'm like, yeah, all my staggered delays are going to love this. But like some of the things I'm thinking of that we don't have yet that I'd still like to see, or at least evolve more. Like one that could evolve more are state queries. So you can now query a container whether or not it's sticky snapped or sticky stuck, or if it's a scroll snapped, or if it even has a scroll bar showing or not. You can ask a container these questions, and they're called scrolls. Yeah, they're scroll state questions because they're all 3 scroll related. There's going to be more of those, and they need help ideating what they are. Like a good example is in view. Is this container in the viewport or not? That's a pain in my butt writing that JavaScript. I hate that loop of JavaScript, actually. It's really nasty. It's just a fire hose of data. You're like, go away. Jeez, I only want to know if you're in view or not. It's very binary. And it's like, I'm in this view this much. Okay, sorry, I'm complaining about intersection observer. Okay, so state queries sound cool. We got sibling index. Another one I pitched a long time ago. I'm going to be selfish and pitch the ones that I pitched that aren't built yet. And one of them is motion blur. It's just like just an easy property to throw on an animation. Motion blurred animations look smoother, even if they're lower frame rate. There's all sorts of cool value props for motion blur. Right now, we can only simulate X blur and Y blur with SVG, or entire element blur by blurring the entire element. And it would be really nice to have a progressive motion blur or other types of motion blur. They just create very cool visual effects. And it's CSS's job. Hey, CSS, I want you to take this thing, do a little visual thingy to it. That'd be great. The fit text is another one. So the ability to write a message into a sandwich board. So you got a little sandwich board, you write a message and you just say, hey, line wrap where it makes sense and always fit the width and let the text height grow to whatever. I want a cool slab text effect, CSS, just do it. The content doesn't need to change. I don't need to add line breaks, just do it. That one would be cool. And then another scroll thing I've always wanted is like over scroll effects. So things like the elastic thing that happens at the edges. And so I always simulate this with scroll-driven animations. I leave all this empty scroll space on the edge of my scrollers so that you can scroll towards nothing and then you let go and it snaps back. And I'm just like, that's just good feedback to a user that, hey, you're at the end. So it'd be cool to give us more capabilities for that, or at least in Chrome specifically, allow us to do that on nested scroll areas. Right now, Safari and Firefox, if you make a little tiny scroll bar scenario in the tiny center of your screen and you scroll up and down on it, it'll bounce at the top and the bottom. And on Chrome, if you do that little one in the middle, it bonks its head and just, and it's very awkward. But the root scroller, the one on the main page, that one's bouncy. So you're like, hey, you got the bouncy code, apply it everywhere. I would love that. So those are some things I'd like to see.
I love those. Those sound awesome. The sandwich board one really is appealing because you see it so many times. It just doesn't fill the space or it flows off or something like that. And just having it just grow to fit whatever space it's in, that'd be awesome. Well, guys, it has been wonderful talking to you. Is there anything about the state of CSS this year that we haven't covered that you think developers should be aware of or know about?
I think my main bit of advice is to if you think you're trying to implement something and you've always used JavaScript for it before, just do a quick search and see if you can do it with CSS now, because there's a good chance you might be able to. Yeah, I think that's definitely worth doing, because I'm always surprised. I put out content where I'll mention a feature that I've taken for granted forever. I did one recently on object fit and it exploded. And I'm like, I guess lots of people still need to hear about this. And I have to keep reminding myself to talk about things that I've been using for 5 years. Yeah, there's a lot of solutions out there that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. And the browser support for a lot of them might actually be pretty good. Even though we've been talking about some really cutting edge stuff now, there's still a lot of other stuff that is out there that I think not enough people know about.
Nice. Yeah, nailed it on the head. I'd say, if you're wondering what's new in CSS, do one new feature a week just to sort of slow drip your way back into what CSS can do these days. And if you want more than that, there's always listicles and things that sort of break them all out and you can attack them that way. But yeah, I like what Kevin's saying. Look to see if CSS can do it before you go to JavaScript. HTML and CSS are doing more and more of JavaScript's work every month. And it's easier on you as a developer. And you get to, anyway, there's all sorts of benefits to staying on top of these things. So yeah, maybe consider a weekly digest of one new CSS property a week or something, or subscribe to some newsletters. Maybe there's people speaking on here that have them that can send you this for you. So if you don't want to go look for it, people will put it in your inbox.
Even better. So if people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to find you online?
I'm at nerdy.dev, the website.
I'm at kevinpowell.co.
Fantastic. Again, thank you guys for joining us on the LogRocket podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you.
Same page.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you so much.